All right, hello everyone and welcome to DIG's Security webinar. I'm Neta from DIG's marketing team and I'm so excited to have all of you join us today. Before we jump into today's jam-packed session, I'm just gonna go over a couple of housekeeping notes. So today's session is being recorded and yes, we're gonna share the recording with all of you. And throughout today's presentation, feel free to use the Q&A button to ask us any question you may have. We're going to answer them during the Q&A portion of the webinar. And with that, let's get to our speakers. So today we have Dan Benjamin, founder and CEO of DIG Security. He's a cyber and cloud security expert and DIG's fearless leader. And next, we're very fortunate to have Daniel Goldenberg join us today. He's the Director of Information Security at Plymouth Rock Assurance and is responsible for all aspects of the company's information and corporate security, as well as governance, risk, and compliance. And now it's time to hear from the experts. So let's get right on to it. First question is for you, Dan B. So on a typical day, you meet with several CISOs, and we'd love to hear your inside information on what's currently top of mind for them today.
Excellent question. So first off, hi everyone. Glad to see all of you here, and I like seeing kind of the number of people joining keeps increasing. I'm joined today with my great friend Daniel G. He's also currently in Tel Aviv, but originally based in Boston. And currently we're at the midst of the CISO Summit organized by Teammate, which is one of our funds. So it's a very interesting time because there's 100 CISOs in the same building all together right now. So it's a really interesting time. Now, when we kind of talk about what's top of mind for CISOs today is a couple of kind of key trends that are happening today. First off, there's this kind of big movement into the cloud. Organizations are now putting a date into movement into the cloud, and I think it's the same with you, Danji, of kind of a specific cutoff points for moving into the cloud, and then how do we adapt our existing tool sets when we move to the cloud? What we purchased for the on-prem world doesn't really adapt to the cloud today, and how do we essentially help the organization throughout this migration? How do we help them architect it better? How do we help them build secure applications in the cloud, which is a very big topic. Second is, while we do this migration, we're now kind of stuck with having to secure two very, very different types of landscapes, right? We have kind of the public cloud infrastructure that we essentially need to now secure, which requires a set of tools. And we have the on-prem infrastructure that essentially requires a set of tools. And during this time, it creates a lot of redundancy and a lot of kind of confusion in a typical organization. So that's kind of a big topic that is being discussed in this session. Third, ransomware, a very big topic that has kind of been accompanying us for a couple of years. How do we help organizations become data resilient? How do we protect ourselves against ransomware? How do we detect ransomware in our environment? How do we prevent malware from coming into our endpoints and into our cloud and into our on-prem? And lastly, data security. Data security, Gartner recently mentioned that it's #1 trend right now, data security and data privacy, because of all the different compliance regulations and privacy regulations that are now coming from every single state and from every single country. So it started, of course, around 2018 with GDPR. And now we have CCPA in California. And now I think that there's 5 states in the US that have their own privacy rules. We have LGPD in Brazil. We have the data law in India and the data law in China. And each country is now essentially implementing the same data controls that they're required. So many trends around cloud resiliency, ransomware, privacy, data security are kind of a big top of mind. But what did I miss, Danji? You've been here kind of throughout this last couple of days. What did you see?
Yeah, I think you hit it. You know, it's not a matter of if people are moving to the cloud, it's a matter of when. I think a lot of organizations have made a forward statement in terms of what workloads are going to be moved when, and they're looking for results. I think you see a lot of pressure from the board coming down on leadership teams around generative AI, and how you can tap into different data silos and make use of that data. Seeing a lot of interesting fun cases around knowledge bases and supporting customer service centers vis-a-vis with generative AI. Compliance is definitely front of mind. And I think the backside of compliance is really supply chain risk, as well as third-party risk and audit. I think there's a lot of good momentum going into that, certainly with all of the regulation going across the world. People are being held responsible for the data at hand and being able to manage it.
Great topics, Dan.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing. And before we move on, we'd like to conduct a quick audience poll. So I'm going to launch the poll and go ahead and choose the answer that fits your organization the most. So launch this and go ahead, take a look and just pick the answer that suits you the most. And you see the answers coming in. Interesting spread. Let's give everyone a few more seconds. Get everyone's answers. All right. And let's, a few more stragglers. All right, gonna end it and share the results.
That's not surprising.
Yeah. Considering you attending a data security webinar, this makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the interesting fact about this, and when I was working at Microsoft, I used to lead the multi-cloud security strategy at Microsoft. And I used to say that multi-cloud is inevitable. I don't think a lot of organizations are moving to becoming multi-cloud environments by choice. I think that when you have a 5,000 employee company that grows through acquisitions, or a 10,000 employee company, or 20,000 employee company that typically grows through inorganic growth or through acquisitions, if they run now on a different clouds, there is no financial sense in moving them between one cloud and another. And then essentially the cloud landscape keeps on growing and growing. So let's say you had 5,000 employees running on AWS, and now you've got 1,000 employees running on Azure. You're now going to run in 2 clouds. And if you buy another company running on GCP, you're now going to run 3 clouds. So the funny thing is that we originally thought that multi-cloud is choice. Today we understand that multi-cloud is just inevitable. Organizations have to do it, or will get there. And then we need to prepare for it. And how do we essentially build controls that are multi-cloud, whether it is for data or for APIs or for networks or for applications and so on.
So that's actually a great segue for the next question, which is a two-parter for Daniel G. So what data does your company hold on to? And then what challenges do you face in keeping this data protected and secure?
I challenge that last poll. I think a lot more people are running multi-cloud than I think people really give it credit for. It seems to crop up vis-a-vis those mergers and acquisitions 100%. I think each of those clouds are very different in terms of the public cloud. I think their use cases are very different in terms of, I think it speaks to some of the business units specifically, whether you're leveraging BigQuery on GCP, or you're leveraging some of the more modeling services on Redshift and AWS. I think there are dramatically different use cases there. Data within Plymouth Rock is quite an amalgamation. We have actuarial data from our clients and customers for the past 40 years. We keep that in a large data warehouse that we manage a number of different tests and cases around and model out our data accordingly. We're dealing with a lot of regulated state information in terms of driver's license numbers, financial data within our ERP. So really the data is quite robust and it sprawls across the entire organization.
Wow. Okay, thanks, Danielle. Before moving on to the next question, we have an exciting audience quiz. So anyone who answers the question correctly will be placed in the running to win a $50 gift card. So pay attention to this. Gonna launch the one question quiz and invite you to share your response. Okay. So what solution would you recommend to Daniel and Plymouth Rock to address their data security challenges? Okay, some of the answers coming in fast and furious. Okay, wait 3 more seconds to give everyone a chance to vote for chance to win a $50 gift card. Anyone else? Okay. Let's share the results. Okay, so this is the distribution. The correct answer is DSPM and DDR. We're going to keep track of everyone who submitted the correct answer, and we're going to notify you of the winner after the webinar. If we're going back to the questions, Danby, we've been hearing a lot about these two acronyms more and more lately, DSPM and DDR. Can you please give us an introduction to what these mean?
Of course. And also kind of pull in Danji for these specific sessions. I think this can be kind of an interesting discussion about this and kind of looping into the challenges that Dan had at his organization and how we were trying to tackle them. The term DSPM essentially stands for Data Security Posture Management. But eventually it talks about how do we visualize data risk? How do we create data-centric security? How do we create controls that stem from the data outwards versus trying to essentially protect the perimeter and hoping that it will cover the data? So data security posture management essentially comes with a different strategy in mind. It says, let's first off discover any type of data that we own inside our environments. Let's classify all the information. Let's find PII or PHI or PCI or any type of regulated data. Let's find sensitive data that just belongs to us. Let's understand who is using that data. Where do we have access permission issues? How is data moving inside the organization? Where is it being stored? Do we have any data sovereignty issues? Do we have any data compliance issues? Do we have issues with posture or encryption? Eventually, where do we have data risk, right? That's the thought behind DSPM. Now, the combination with DDR just says that posture is not enough. We're still going to have hundreds, if not thousands of people, machines, vendors, and contractors that will have access to this data. They should have access to this data. But that access today goes completely unmonitored. And that's where DDR essentially comes into play. DDR essentially says data detection and response. How do we detect and respond when something bad happens with our information? Let's say some developer decides to download an entire production database to his machine. Happens 5 times a day, by the way, across our customers. Or what happens if someone does a mass download and copies all the information to his work laptop or to his home laptop? What happens if someone copies data outside of the cloud to a different cloud? We've seen that in one of the major banks. We onboarded the major bank and we saw that all their data was being copied to an external AWS account that doesn't belong to them. So the whole scenario here behind building controls around data and data detection response, essentially controlling and detecting and responding when something violates our policies inside the organization. When someone essentially violates, it doesn't need to be a specific individual, it can be also a machine, or it can be a contractor, it can be anyone that has access to this information. Think about it as modern DLP for the cloud. DLP doesn't really work in the cloud. And it's all kind of shifted into kind of detection and response. How do we detect when something bad happens and how do we respond to it as an organization? So that's kind of the combination of data security posture, but also combining the real-time effects of it, of of understanding the information and understanding what should and should not happen. But Danji, maybe I'll kind of loop you in this specific discussion as well. When you kind of came, when we originally met, and I think that was what, AWS reinforced last year, right? When you initially heard about Dig, and you already came to us and you said, oh, you do DSPM, and I like DDR. What was the problem that you were trying to solve? How can you, when you thought about us, what were the main challenges that you had inside the organization and the approaches to solving them were before you implemented Dig and maybe after?
Yeah, so a little context around that. I joined Plymouth Rock in January 2022. So I've been on the job for about 18 months now. Plymouth Rock is a 40-year-old privately held insurance company focused in the New England area, mainly on property and casualty insurance. 40 years old, you collect a lot of technical debt, a lot of data silos. And we spoke about kind of a lot of organizations moving to the cloud. Plymouth Rock is no different. We're moving a lot of our core workloads to AWS specifically. And we had a tool set that really didn't speak to kind of our cloud deployments. I have a very junior kind of cloud engineering team, or sometimes making some mistakes. So ensuring that we had a solution that provided some more belt and suspenders. And I think underlying it all in terms of the cloud and cloud security, I think, you know, of all the issues that you're going to run to the cloud, I think, you know, we hear about the boogeyman issues of like your secret keys getting stolen and there being an account takeover. And I think that does happen. But I think that's a very minor subset of the cloud breaches that are happening. The cloud breaches are happening from misconfiguration, from human error, from someone missetting an S3 bucket and exposing data. So really, instead of focusing all of your kind of watchful eyes across your entire cloud deployment, you want to be focused in terms of that cloud deployment, what you're looking after. Mainly, I wanted to focus on the data and the data classification and the data types that I had, because those ultimately are my most sensitive items, my crown jewels within the organization. So I really want something very targeted in that area to really speak about the risks in terms of the workloads and the underlying data sitting within those workloads.
And Vanji, have you tried other products or other solutions to kind of tackle this type of problem before? We don't need to name specific vendors, but maybe kind of approaches.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of alphabet soup right now in terms of cloud products. You know, your CSPMs and your DLPs, I think, really fall short in this area. The CSPMs are really about your posture management in terms of your cloud configuration, but it really doesn't even touch the data, which is a shame, because they're giving you all of that telemetry, all that information about your different systems, but they don't speak about kind of the data that's held within those systems. And that's ultimately where the risk is, and how you need to quantify the risk is the data.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you. Another question for you. We'd love to hear more about your experience of onboarding with the Dig data security platform.
I think that's probably one of my favorite components about kind of the entire engagement with Dig. It is seamless. I have a very small team, and we don't have a ton of cycles to kind of do massive implementations of complex software. We really need to implement solutions that have a very quick time to value. With Dig, it was linking up our AWS account numbers to the platform, launching a configuration script, and we were done. And we were starting to index and classify that data almost instantly. So from an onboarding perspective, things were very fast, it was seamless, and very well supported.
That's
fantastic, and
great to hear.
And Angie, I think that today Plymouth essentially has both their AWS, Azure, and GCP environments connected, right?
Correct. About 10 accounts connected into the platform currently.
Fantastic. Cool.
Dan B, as you've worked with different customers across different industries, would love to hear from you. Who's the persona that typically uses data security solutions within different companies?
That's a great question. And this is also a common question that a lot of our customers ask, right? I think the good cybersecurity products know to understand who the persona is, and then they build a product for them. Sometimes you have engineers building security products, and then they build something cool and they don't understand who should use the product. So we started and understood very early on, if the organization has a data security team or a data security subject matter expert, of course, that's our persona, right? This specific person or this specific team is in charge of protecting data wherever data lives in a typical enterprise. And that can be on the endpoint, and that can be on-prem, that can be in SaaS, that can be in public cloud. Their goal is to become both data compliant, but also data secure. And that's the typical owner if the organization already has a data security team or a data security subject matter expert. Sometimes the organization doesn't. And each organization is built very differently. Also, 1,000 employee organization versus 5,000 versus 100,000 is completely different. So in some organizations, we work directly with cloud security, and they own cloud data security, which is a subset of their cloud security infrastructure. And in some organizations, we work directly with GRC, right? Which essentially helps the organization become compliant. And the biggest component of compliance is data compliance. So those are kind of the three main teams that we work with inside the organization. But I always say, to make this implementation better, engage everyone. Of course, you need to have kind of a clear owner inside the organization and a clear champion, but engage everyone. As long as you have more and more people and more teams working with your product, that means that there's going to be better collaboration. And in the very, very successful implementations that we've done, sometimes we work with 8, 10, even 12 teams. Of course, some organizations are bigger, but we've worked with privacy and compliance and data science and data governance teams and IAM, cloud security. We had FinOps that were trying to save money on their data costs. So we helped them map out data stores that had a lot of information that we thought that they can eliminate. So it was just fascinating to see. I love this kind of this engagement and process.
And Daniel G, does this resonate with you? Which teams at Plymouth Rock currently use the DIG platform?
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent in terms of sharing my tool set across my organization. But the only way you can kind of move security needle accordingly is to get buy-in from everyone and invite everyone into the platform accordingly within kind of the shape and development of the roles. So first and foremost, security engineering is in the platform, of course. In addition to that, we have a strong kind of cloud middleware team that operates on the platform every day. We have plans to expand this into our application development teams, as well as an internal audit.
All right, thank you. Thanks for sharing. So one last question for you, Daniel G, and this is a different one. We noticed on LinkedIn that you decided to skip summer in Vegas, attending Black Hat and DEF CON, and instead come to Tel Aviv and attend Cyber Week and the Teammates CISO Summit. So what's behind that decision?
You know, I think to really appreciate security, you need a global perspective. These threats are coming in from all around the world. And I think you become very, very narrow focused, staying within kind of your city, area, or country, and getting a global perspective is important. And that was really my main mission and goal in coming out to Tel Aviv this year, is understand kind of what some more of the global companies are leveraging, how they're managing security and risk at scale, and how can I take some of those lessons back to Plymouth Rock. I love Hacker Summer Camp out in Las Vegas. But the agenda that Team 8 had set forth, and then the Cyber Week on the backside of this seemed like a great opportunity to kind of come out and meet some new folks.
Well, we definitely love having you here in Tel Aviv, so we're fully supportive. Thanks for coming. All right. Thank you both for the incredible discussion. And now we're gonna open it up to Q&A. So a reminder, if you haven't already, if you have a question, feel free to submit it in the Q&A. And let me turn to the questions we've already received during the presentation. And the first one is for Dan B. So how do you define policies for each cloud?
It's a great question. So first off, as Dan G said, each cloud is different. Each data store is different. And I think that's the main challenge in this space. In the past, we used 4, 5, 6 different types of data stores in a typical enterprise. That's what we used to have on-prem. A typical cloud deployment in a customer environment has between 20 to 30 different types of data stores and thousands, if not tens of thousands of instances. And that's kind of the big proliferation spawn the issue. Now, when you understand this and you understand that a typical enterprise is going to have both a Mongo and a MySQL and a Postgres and multiple different types of versions of RDS and Cloud SQL and Azure SQL and anything like that, then you understand that you need to deeply learn these different types of data stores. You need to understand what can happen, what shouldn't happen, what are bad controls that can essentially be implemented on each. But you also want to build something wide that will adapt to any type of new data store that someone can boot up. For example, let's just take a very obvious scenario. We don't want any developer to download a production database to their personal machine. I don't see any scenario that something like this should happen in a typical organization. And if they do, they should whitelist it. Now, then is how do you implement that across 30, 40, 50 different types of data stores that a typical enterprise can run across their clouds? So that challenge is a really interesting challenge. I think the problem is the proliferation. How do you detect this in the logs? How do you make sure that the right logs are enabled? How do you make sure that you cover all the scenarios of something like this that might happen? So this is something that we come out of the box. We come with these scenarios to our customers and say, okay, we'll discover and match these different types of opportunities. Now, other than that, of course, we come with out-of-the-box risks. And risks can be, for example, sensitive data stores that are non-encrypted, or sensitive data stores that are accessible to the world, or sensitive data stores that are replicating data between compliance regions, for example, from Europe to the US violating GDPR, or from California outside of California violating CCPA, or from Brazil to the US violating LGPD. So these scenarios kind of might happen, and we come with these out of the box. But of course, each organization is different, and they might have their own controls, and they can implement those across their environment. So we allow organizations to build their own custom risks, what they need to comply with, what they want to enforce. And they can do that through the platform today, and it's quite simple. It's a step-by-step processing. In less than 30 seconds, you have compliance risks available on the platform.
Thanks, Dan. The next question we got is for Daniel. In your experience using Dig's platform, did the accuracy of classification meet your expectations?
Absolutely. There are, I think, over 100 different data types that are loaded onto the platform out of the box. And then you could add custom data types on top of that. Working in the insurance industry, we have a lot of varying different data types and different data classifications and different kind of subsets of that information. Driver's license numbers are not standardized from state to state. They look a little bit different. Different taxonomies of different identifications within our databases look a little bit different, have nuances across our organization. The platform picks up those nuances pretty well and kind of delivers those actionable insights directly onto the platform.
Cool, that's good to hear. Another question for Dan B. Can Dig identify stale data assets? Do you provide out-of-the-box reports?
Yeah, so that's actually really cool. We look at it in two different pieces. First off, we provide candidates for either data deletion or data retention policy. Sometimes, let me give you a very simple example. Let's say you have an automated process that once a day takes an entire production database, takes a dump of it and puts it in a specific bucket. And then you have some sort of a data backup solution that backs it up to a different cloud or backs it up to a different host provider. That's great. But let's say your production database is 100 terabytes of data. Now, that can accumulate very, very quickly. So let's say you run it for 100 days. So 100 terabytes times 100, that's expensive. Let's say you accumulate it for a year. That's very expensive. Let's say you accumulate it for 3 years. Super expensive. If you don't, data retention policies are very easy to implement. And they can essentially eliminate tons of money from your cloud bill. Or for example, orphan snapshots. When an organization today, they can essentially generate a snapshot of a running data store. Now, if they delete the original data store, then you have something called an orphan snapshot, which means essentially a snapshot of a data store that doesn't exist anymore. Now, typically that's fine if you keep that snapshot for a week, a month, even 6 months. Sometimes you find orphan snapshots that have been there for the past 5 years, 6 years. No one is ever going to use data that was there 5 years ago that was never touched and ever restore that back into production. There's no chance. That's why you have daily backups or weekly backups or something like that. So the ability to essentially discover not only retention policies or the ability to essentially discover orphan snapshots, I think that's an interesting topic. And on the other side of it, we recently launched something really cool. We call this data freshness. If someone in the audience has a better name for that, let us know. But currently it's called data freshness, which essentially talks about which data stores are actually active and which data stores aren't. So this is something new because we already look at data activity logs. We look at how each piece of data stores are actually being used in the wild, right? We can identify which data stores aren't being used. And who wants to guess? We should have done another poll here. Who wants to guess what percentage of data stores today in a typical cloud environment are not active? So because we don't have the actual poll here, that's around 40% today. 40% of all data stores in a typical cloud infrastructure is not being used. Haven't been read in the last 90 days, haven't been written to in the last 90 days. So the ability here at DIG to identify which data stores are being used or not, and which the ones that haven't been read or written to in the last 90 days are definite candidates for like deletion. So those are kind of good opportunities to understand usage, freshness, candidates for cost reduction, but also candidates to understand maybe they're not being used correctly, right? So there's a lot of visibility into kind of data usage with using DIG today.
All right. Couple of additional questions coming in. How is securing data in the cloud different than securing it on-prem? That's one. Then B, I guess, is for you.
I'm sorry, you were cutting off.
Oh, sorry. How is securing data in the cloud different than securing it on-prem?
Another great question. So on-prem and cloud is just different in how data is being kept and controlled, right? So let's kind of talk about this. Let's kind of talk about specific things that can't happen on-prem, but can only happen in the cloud, right? Let's just take a very simple scenario. What happened to, there was a very large data breach that happened about 2 years ago. I won't name the company, but they had an attacker that essentially went to each one of their databases, took a snapshot of it, and shared that snapshot with a different cloud infrastructure, with a different cloud account. Now, sharing is not a concept that even exists on-prem, right? No one would look for it. It will never traverse a data gateway. It will never traverse the firewall, the proxy, whatever it is that they have inside the on-prem environment. So the traditional challenges in the public cloud are just different. On-prem, for example, encryption is a very, very big topic. In the cloud, typically most cloud vendors have encryption by default. This is also rather new, but in the past, but on-prem, it doesn't really exist. Or, for example, there are some data stores that live on-prem that can't live in the cloud. Or the fact that on-prem, you used to essentially protect data with something called DAMs, database activity monitoring solutions, agent-based. In the cloud, you can't install an agent on an RDS or any type of managed data store. So most of these different types of data security controls are just inefficient in the cloud. Either they can't work at all, or they essentially are not relevant because they don't cover the different types of scenarios that could have happened. Does that make sense? Dan, do you have anything to add over there? You recently did this migration.
Oh, my migration's still ongoing. I think that's that's the power that I was talking about earlier in terms of like having that belt and suspenders approach as you're going through that cloud modernization journey, as you're moving those workloads and you're spinning up those RDSs. You know, what's the security around it? What's the encryption? Are people making the right decisions? Are they sticking to your standards? That's what a lot of the telemetry is provided by the DIG platform in terms of what is going on with that data underneath the surface.
All right, another interesting question, Daniel G. I guess it's for you, maybe for both of you. What does DIG platform currently not do and you wish it did?
Oh, I love it to get into more data stores. I think my biggest data store outside of AWS is probably within Microsoft. You know, I think there's a lot of Office 365 and Google Workspace customers out there with huge data stores in OneDrive and Google Drive. To be able to classify that data within those data stores, I think is going to be crucial as moving forward to have a comprehensive view of the data across your organization. That's what I love to see in the future.
And I think that's a great topic. Our goal is eventually to be the data security stack for the modern enterprise. And the modern enterprise, again, keeps data in public clouds, which is what we already do. We do AWS and Azure and GCP and Snowflake and Databricks. But of course, we will expand to other locations where a typical enterprise lives, and the locations that essentially Danji was talking about, not to give a spoiler out, are something that we will be releasing very, very soon.
Well, we're all going to be on our toes and on the lookout. Thank you both so much for your time today. Before we wrap up, I just want to let everyone know that our team of experts is ready, willing, and able to help you learn more about how your organization can effectively protect all of your data assets. You can very easily book a demo through our website, or we're gonna follow up with all of you, share the recording and also the winners for the raffle. And feel free to follow up if you'd like to see a demo, book a meeting with us. And on behalf of DIG, a huge thank you to both our speakers, especially Daniel G. Enjoy your time in Tel Aviv. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.